Welcome to the channel. Asthma is one of the most common chronic respiratory conditions in the world, affecting hundreds of millions of people, yet it is often misunderstood. Many people know asthma as a disease that causes difficulty in breathing, but few understand what's really happening inside the body when someone with asthma struggles to take in air. The truth is that asthma is not just about the lungs. It's about inflammation, sensitivity, and the immune system's overreaction to what it perceives as a threat. When you breathe, air travels through a network of tubes called the airways, which deliver oxygen to your lungs. In people with asthma, these airways are unusually sensitive and tend to narrow easily in response to certain triggers. This narrowing, combined with swelling and extra mucus production, makes it difficult for air to move in and out, causing wheezing, coughing, and shortness of breath. Asthma is a complex condition that develops from a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Some people are born with a genetic predisposition to asthma, meaning that their immune systems are more reactive than others. For these individuals, exposure to certain triggers such as dust, pollen, smoke, or even cold air can cause an exaggerated immune response. When this happens, the muscles around the airways tighten, the lining of the airway swells, and mucus fills the passage, making breathing difficult. This overreaction is what doctors refer to as an asthma attack or flare-up. These attacks can range from mild to life-threatening, depending on how severely the airways are affected. One of the main causes behind asthma is chronic inflammation of the airways. Even when a person isn't having an asthma attack, their airways may still be inflamed at a low level. Over time, this constant inflammation can cause permanent changes in the structure of the airways, making them thicker and narrower. This process, known as airway remodeling, can make asthma worse and harder to control. The inflammation is often driven by immune cells like eosinophils and mast cells, which release chemicals that make the airways sensitive and swollen. This is why asthma is not just a simple condition of blocked airways. It's a long-term inflammatory disease that affects the way the respiratory system functions. Another major cause of asthma is exposure to allergens. Allergens are substances that are normally harmless but can trigger an immune response in people who are sensitive to them. Common allergens include dust mites, pet dander, mold spores, pollen, and certain foods. When someone with asthma inhales or comes into contact with these allergens, their immune system reacts as if it were fighting off an infection. It releases inflammatory chemicals like histamine, which cause the airway lining to swell and narrow. This allergic response explains why asthma often goes hand in hand with other allergic conditions such as hay fever or eczema. In fact, people who have allergies are at a much higher risk of developing asthma than those who don't. Environmental pollution is another important cause that has become more relevant in recent decades. Studies show that people living in urban areas with high levels of air pollution are more likely to develop asthma than those in cleaner environments. Pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide, ozone, and particulate matter from vehicles and factories can irritate the lungs and trigger inflammation. Even indoor pollutants like cigarette smoke, cleaning chemicals, or fumes from cooking oil can worsen asthma symptoms. Children are particularly vulnerable because their lungs are still developing, and prolonged exposure to polluted air can lead to lifelong respiratory issues. The connection between pollution and asthma highlights how lifestyle and environment play a crucial role in shaping respiratory health. Genetics also play a significant part in determining who develops asthma. If one or both parents have asthma, their children have a higher chance of having it as well. Scientists have identified multiple genes related to the immune system and lung function that increase susceptibility to asthma. However, having these genes doesn't guarantee that someone will develop the condition. It simply increases the risk. The interaction between genes and the environment is key. For example, a child might inherit a genetic tendency for asthma, but only develop it after being exposed to certain allergens, infections, or pollutants early in life. This gene-environment interaction makes asthma a highly individualized condition, with different causes and triggers for each person. Infections in early childhood can also contribute to asthma development. Certain viral infections, especially those affecting the respiratory system such as respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, or rhinovirus, can damage the delicate tissues of a baby's lungs. In children who are already genetically predisposed, these infections can set off an abnormal immune response that continues into adulthood. Some researchers believe that the way the immune system learns to respond to infections in early life can shape the likelihood of developing asthma later on. For instance, children who grow up in overly sterile environments might not be exposed to enough germs to train their immune systems properly, leading to an increased risk of allergies and asthma, a concept known as the hygiene hypothesis. Apart from genetics and infections, lifestyle factors also influence the development and severity of asthma. Obesity is one such factor. Research shows that overweight individuals are more likely to suffer from asthma, and their symptoms tend to be more severe. The exact reason isn't fully understood, but it's thought that extra fat tissue produces inflammatory substances that worsen airway inflammation. Additionally, the physical pressure of excess weight on the chest can make breathing more difficult. Poor diet, lack of exercise, and sedentary habits also contribute to inflammation, creating a cycle that aggravates asthma symptoms over time. Occupational exposure is another major cause of asthma in adults. Many workers develop what's called occupational asthma after being exposed to irritants or chemicals in the workplace. These can include dust from flour or wood, fumes from paints and cleaning products, or gases from industrial processes. Over time, repeated exposure can make the airways overly sensitive, even to substances that didn't initially cause any problems. Once this sensitivity develops, it can persist for years, and in some cases, the person may have to change jobs to prevent further damage to their lungs. Emotional and psychological factors can also play a surprising role in asthma. While emotions do not directly cause asthma, stress and anxiety can trigger or worsen symptoms. When a person is stressed, their body releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which can alter breathing patterns and increase airway reactivity. This can lead to shortness of breath, tightness in the chest, or even a full-blown asthma attack. Moreover, living with a chronic condition like asthma can itself be stressful, creating a vicious cycle where anxiety worsens breathing problems and breathing problems increase anxiety. Another factor that can cause or worsen asthma is exposure to tobacco smoke. Cigarette smoke is one of the most harmful irritants to the lungs, even for people who do not smoke themselves. Secondhand smoke contains thousands of chemicals that can inflame and damage the airways, making them more reactive and sensitive over time. Children who grow up in homes where people smoke are far more likely to develop asthma, and their symptoms tend to be more severe. In adults who already have asthma, smoking can make their medication less effective and increase the frequency of attacks. Quitting smoking and avoiding exposure to secondhand smoke is therefore one of the most powerful steps anyone can take to protect their respiratory health. Climate and weather conditions can also act as triggers for asthma, particularly for those who are already prone to it. Cold air is a well-known trigger. It causes the airways to tighten, leading to coughing and difficulty breathing. Sudden changes in temperature, humidity, or air pressure can also irritate sensitive airways. For some people, hot and humid weather can make asthma worse because it increases levels of pollutants and allergens in the air. Others may find that windy days stir up dust, pollen, or mold spores, making breathing harder. The environment around us, from the quality of the air we breathe to the temperature we live in, plays a massive role in determining how the lungs respond and how severe asthma symptoms become. Another cause that often goes unnoticed is exposure to household chemicals and cleaning products. Many people use sprays, air fresheners, and disinfectants daily without realizing that these products release volatile organic compounds, VOCs, into the air. These chemicals can irritate the lining of the airways, especially when used in poorly ventilated spaces. Over time, this constant irritation can lead to inflammation and make the lungs more reactive. Similarly, strong odors from paints, glues, or new furniture can also release harmful fumes that worsen asthma. People who already have sensitive lungs or allergies should take special care to use natural or fragrance-free cleaning alternatives and ensure good airflow when using such products indoors. Mold exposure is another underestimated factor contributing to asthma. Mold grows in damp and poorly ventilated areas, such as bathrooms, basements, or kitchens. When mold spores become airborne and are inhaled, they can trigger allergic reactions in sensitive individuals. The immune system identifies these spores as invaders, causing inflammation and narrowing of the airways. Continuous exposure to mold can make asthma worse and even cause symptoms in people who have never had the condition before. Preventing mold growth by controlling humidity levels, fixing leaks, and keeping living spaces dry is an essential step in asthma management and prevention. The role of diet and nutrition in asthma has become a growing area of research. A diet lacking in essential nutrients can weaken the immune system and make inflammation worse. For example, people who eat few fruits and vegetables miss out on antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, and beta-carotene, which protect the lungs from oxidative damage. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in fish and nuts, have anti-inflammatory properties that help maintain healthy airways. On the other hand, diets high in processed foods, refined sugars, and unhealthy fats promote inflammation throughout the body, including in the lungs. Low levels of vitamin D have also been linked to higher asthma risk, possibly because this vitamin helps regulate immune responses and reduce airway sensitivity. Asthma can also be influenced by hormonal changes. Many women notice that their symptoms vary during their menstrual cycle, pregnancy, or menopause. Hormones like estrogen and progesterone affect the immune system and the smooth muscles that line the airways. During pregnancy, for example, increased levels of certain hormones can lead to swelling in the respiratory passages, which may make asthma worse for some women. In others, hormonal changes can have the opposite effect and temporarily ease symptoms. Understanding how hormones affect asthma helps doctors adjust treatment plans to maintain control during these fluctuations. Another interesting cause is the influence of occupational and industrial pollutants. Workers in industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, or construction are often exposed to airborne irritants like dust, smoke, or chemical fumes. These irritants can directly damage the lining of the lungs or cause allergic reactions that lead to chronic inflammation. Asthma that develops due to exposure at work is called occupational asthma, and it is one of the most common types of adult-onset asthma. In some cases, once the exposure stops, symptoms improve, but in others, the damage becomes permanent and the person must continue lifelong management. Asthma can also result from an overactive immune system, particularly one that reacts strongly to otherwise harmless substances. This overactivity often begins early in life. Children who are exposed to allergens, pollutants, or certain infections while their immune systems are still developing are more likely to have exaggerated immune responses later on. The immune system learns to recognize and overreact to triggers such as pollen, dust, or pet dander, which then cause airway inflammation and constriction. This heightened immune sensitivity is what makes asthma both a respiratory and an immunological disorder. Indoor air quality is another major factor contributing to asthma development. Modern homes are designed to be energy efficient and tightly sealed, which means that air circulation is often limited. This allows allergens, dust mites, pet dander, and chemicals from furniture or carpets to accumulate indoors. Breathing in these irritants on a daily basis can increase airway inflammation and trigger asthma attacks. Using air purifiers, vacuuming regularly, and keeping indoor humidity at an optimal level can significantly reduce exposure to these triggers and make breathing easier for asthma sufferers. Early childhood environment also has a strong influence on asthma risk. Children who grow up around pets, farm animals, or in rural environments tend to have lower asthma rates compared to those raised in overly clean, urban settings. This supports the hygiene hypothesis, which suggests that limited exposure to germs and microbes during childhood prevents the immune system from developing proper tolerance. Without early exposure, the immune system becomes hypersensitive to harmless particles later in life, increasing the risk of allergies and asthma. So while cleanliness is important, oversanitization might actually be doing more harm than good for the immune system. In some cases, asthma may be linked to certain medications. For example, drugs like aspirin or beta blockers, which are commonly used for pain relief or heart conditions, can cause asthma symptoms in sensitive individuals. This is known as aspirin-induced asthma. The mechanism behind it involves the way these medications interfere with certain enzymes in the body, leading to an imbalance of chemicals that regulate inflammation in the airways. People with this form of asthma often experience wheezing, coughing, and chest tightness shortly after taking these drugs, so they must be cautious and consult doctors for suitable alternatives. Weather changes can also play a significant role in triggering asthma. Some people experience worsening symptoms during the winter because cold air dries and constricts the airways. Others find that spring and fall seasons are the most problematic due to high pollen counts. Humid weather can encourage mold growth and increase air pollution levels, making breathing difficult for sensitive individuals. Rapid shifts from hot to cold or dry to humid conditions can further irritate the lungs. Because asthma is highly sensitive to environmental conditions, managing exposure during extreme weather is key to preventing flare-ups. Even strong emotions can act as triggers for asthma. Feelings such as laughter, anger, fear, or excitement can cause changes in breathing patterns and increase airway constriction. During intense emotions, the body releases stress hormones and the breathing rate changes rapidly, sometimes causing hyperventilation. This can lead to shortness of breath or wheezing in people with asthma. While emotional responses are natural, learning how to manage stress and practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing or mindfulness can reduce emotional triggers and improve overall asthma control. In addition to these causes, viral respiratory infections are one of the most common triggers for asthma attacks. Viruses like the common cold or flu can inflame the airways and make them more sensitive. For children, these infections can be particularly severe because their airways are smaller and more easily blocked by swelling and mucus. Adults with asthma are also at risk because infections can make existing inflammation worse. Getting vaccinated against flu and maintaining good hygiene practices, such as frequent hand washing, can help minimize this risk. Another often overlooked cause is exposure to cold and dry air during exercise. Exercise-induced asthma occurs when physical activity causes the airways to narrow temporarily. This happens because rapid breathing during exercise brings large amounts of cool, dry air into the lungs, which irritates the airways and triggers symptoms like coughing or wheezing. While exercise is essential for good health, people with exercise-induced asthma can manage their condition by warming up properly, wearing masks or scarves in cold weather, and using prescribed inhalers before activity. And that brings us to the end of this detailed journey about asthma and its causes. Understanding how this condition develops is the first step toward managing it effectively and living a healthy, full life. If you found this video helpful and learned something new, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and informative health videos.